So what I'm seeing, which I find particularly exciting, is a new breed of climate tech funds that define success in a different ways. They are looking to build what they called phoenixes as opposed to unicorns. And as you know, unicorn is a company that have reached 1 billion in valuation, as opposed to a phoenix, which is a company actually that goes to at least 100 million in valuation. So building, solid businesses, but also by restoring nature and ecosystem at the same time.
Welcome to Carbon Conversations, a podcast by Biochar Life, where we explore the cutting edge of environmental solutions. From biochar to smart agriculture to the climate tech revolution, we sit down with experts and business leaders at the forefront of change. This is your host, Matt Rickard. Hey, Helena, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hi, Matt. Really happy to be here with you.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for joining. It's I've been looking forward to this because it's a little bit different. We've been running the pod for near on a year now, and I think pretty much every conversation has been with obviously people in the climate space, but on the kind of the vendor side or the producer side, or some scientists, some but the difference today, I think, is speaking to someone on the side of the investor side. So I think this will be interesting. I'm genuinely curious, and I know a lot of the organizations that I speak to daily will also be interested. So I don't do a disservice, how about I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do. And thanks for joining. I know it's probably evening time over there. I'm in the UK this week, so it's a very convenient afternoon for me, but it must be in the evening for you, I assume.
No, it's my pleasure. Very happy to be with you today, Matt, and share my journey so far in climate tech. Quick intro. I'll give you like the 2-minute version. So I'm Helena Wasserman, originally half Swiss, half Italian. Currently live in New York City, and I actually started my career in impact at the Clinton Foundation about a decade ago. So I've seen the impact and sustainability sectors evolve over the last decade. And about 4 years ago, I decided to go full on climate as an angel investor. And also I run a community called Investors for Climate, which is a network of 180 climate investors based all over the world. And I also launched my own climate accelerator, where I support selected climate founders with fundraising and go-to markets and basically getting them to scale. So that's what I do. And I've learned some interesting lessons along the way.
Well, was there a kind of turning point when you got into this sector? Is there something specific that kind of fueled your passion for climate investment, for being an investor, for helping other people raise money? Was there a kind of turning point where you got into this space?
Well, I've actually been into this since I was 14, since high school. So for me, it's been a long-lasting love story. I think it's just, I think the world now there's such a massive climate emergency that now everybody's also thinking about this. So it's just a different time in history, but I think, my passion has been around for a while.
Cool. I wanted to talk about the investment landscape a bit. I mean, I'm not new to startups. I've been in the startup space for, more than 10 years now, and both kind of co-founded and startups and fundraised. I'm in the UK at the moment because we're fundraising. But, this is probably for me, at least in the last couple of years, more new being in the climate tech space, specifically in terms of fundraising. Can you give us just a bit of a, the landscape of climate startups, what you've seen over the last 10 years in terms of the investment that's there, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities? I know that's a very wide question, but I know that, you've both been a seed investor, a Series A investor. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen and what you're seeing today in terms of investment in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So very high level, if you look at 10 years ago, sustainability as a sector, broadly speaking, was mostly driven by the nonprofit, by the public sector, and a few social enterprises. So this was a decade ago. What happened after that, we had the first clean tech boom, where that was driven by the private sector, and a lot of people lost money. And now what we're seeing is kind of like a second wave of clean tech, which we've renamed climate tech, where things now, because it's now the private sector leading the way again, mostly because of a few reasons. One is that the cost of these climate tech technologies have gone down massively. If you look at solar, solar has gone down like 5 times in the last decade. So because of that, now you're seeing also a lot of talent coming to climate tech, because now it's an opportunity not only to do good, but also to make money because solutions are market ready. So because of these changes, you're seeing the sector evolve quite significantly. And for me as an investor, it's exciting because you have, real capital, talent, and opportunities in the sector right now.
What in terms of the kind of traditional VC space and the kind of clean tech space, climate tech space, what are you seeing? More and more specialized kind of funds and VCs, or are you seeing traditional technology tech VCs coming into this space, or a bit of both? What is the kind of makeup from that point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's exciting over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of new climate tech funds emerge. So, climate VCs, traditional VCs, and that's exciting also because some of them are building, the typical unicorn startups or looking for unicorns, but others also have kind of like a different way of seeing growth and risk and its relationship to the environment. So what I'm seeing, which I find particularly exciting, is a new breed of climate tech funds that define success in a different ways. They are looking to build what they called phoenixes as opposed to unicorns. And, as you know, unicorn is a company that have reached 1 billion in valuation, as opposed to a phoenix, which is a company actually that goes to at least 100 million in valuation. So building, solid businesses, but also by restoring nature and ecosystem at the same time. And so I'm seeing more and more climate VCs with this investment thesis, which I find particularly exciting.
It's interesting that I didn't know what a phoenix was until I saw it on your, I think, LinkedIn profile. I had to go and actually look it up. So it's not, everyone, you hear the unicorn term consistently in the startup space, but phoenix is not something that I'd heard before. So very interesting. What are I'm often getting questions myself from other founders, small or startups, small businesses in this sector. What are the kind of common mistakes and key success factors you're seeing, and what advice, I suppose, on that front to startup founders, the crucial things they need to get right in terms of fundraising in this space?
So I say typical mistake, not just in climate but in general, is so I'll talk about 3 typical mistakes. The first one is timeline. So, human beings, we have a tendency of always thinking things will happen much faster than they actually happen in reality. So I think adjusting our timeline, and you may have heard the quote, we overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And so my perspective is like, if you really want to change something significant and really build a solid business, think about it with a 10-year timeline. And then, if you're persistent and talented, you will make it work. So I think timeline is a big one. The second one is often founders can be very much in love with like the idea of their business. And the reality is a good founder is able to pivot and twist and turn and adjust. And, so I think that's a very important factor, like knowing that the idea is like the starting point, but then you'll have to respond to the market and different dynamics, and that idea will change. So it's much more important to focus on, and that brings me to the next point, which is execution. So many people have great ideas, great visions. Oh, how cool if we could do this or if we could do that. But there's actually very few people that actually have the stamina, grit, and execution powerhouse to actually make those happen in the long run, right? And the true value of an entrepreneur, in my opinion, is compound execution across time. And that takes a very specific type of person to actually do that.
It
I don't
also,
know if you your perspective as an entrepreneur.
yeah, but yeah, well, I also think it takes, there's a balance there, right? I mean, there's patience, persistence on the founder side, but then you need the investor to also have that same expectation when they're putting funding into a startup, right? That it does take a lot of time. It does take failing in small doses and re-engineering around that failure and kind of pivoting, like you say. So there's a definite balance, I think, in terms of the, you know, the growth and being able to grow a startup effectively. And it does take time. That's the real key thing. It doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any good kind of examples? What are you seeing? I mean, you mentioned there earlier, I mean, this space has changed a lot in the last 10 years because it was, you know, a kind of social enterprise type space, non-profit type space. There's a lot more technology out there. There's a lot more opportunity. Yeah, sometimes my concern is, you know, ultimately we're trying to solve a massive issue and we don't have all the time in the world. And you don't need 1,000 different types of technologies. You need the right ones to solve this. So there is kind of almost some pressure. But do you have any, you know, where are you seeing investments happen? And do you have any good kind of success stories within the space, or even things that you can share where you've, you know, made a decision to invest because you see, you know, not just returns, but real impact that'll take place?
Well, I think right now, obviously being in March 2024, there's a bit of a slowdown in deployment overall. And you're seeing that in technology, you're seeing that in climate tech as well. So climate tech investing went down 40% last year compared to the year before. But that's in comparison to tech went down 50%. It's still suffering less than other industries. So that's just the general, you know, environment. That being said, you know, we've seen a lot of deployment in mobility, obviously with electric vehicles. I've personally invested as well in electric bikes, electric mopeds. So that's getting, you know, quite a lot of funding. Energy as well, obviously energy transition getting a lot of funding, a lot of attention. Something that excites me particularly, and I think is going to grow in importance, are the nature-based solutions and biodiversity solutions. So that's something right now that is being driven by Europe mostly, because as you've seen, the European government has passed some laws in this area. And as you know, to unlock private capital, we first need public capital to make that happen. So I think that's still not getting as much capital as it should, and it will be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue to a question I had. You may have kind of half answered it there, but something I wanted to ask is, where do you see that balance of responsibility between the private and public sectors, and where is it at? I mean, I know I've seen announcements in the US in the last week or so with some major funds coming through to help seed ideas, but and you can probably, I imagine, speak best to the US market. But where do you see that balance? How much more needs to be done by the public sector, governments? Do you see that coming more and more happening? And yeah, if so, great to hear more on that.
Absolutely. I mean, a good example of that, I lived in Singapore for 7 years, and in Singapore, you have the government and the sovereign wealth fund that is really fueling the climate industry right now. So, whether it's Singapore government or Temasek, they're, pumping so much capital into climate that, then the private sector automatically follows. So I think it's absolutely key to have both government and sovereign wealth funds really powering and being like the first capital. And then that's an automatic signal for funds, whether it's VCs or private equity, to then follow their lead.
What about and I ask this very much from our position, actually. So we're in the middle of a fundraising round at the moment.
How's it going?
So we are, so this year we need to raise around $500,000. And we looked at an equity model when we went into this, but it didn't make sense because we don't really have any IP. We're essentially a services business where we are teaching farmers to create biochar, to remove carbon. We generate credits, and the sale of those credits goes back into pays salaries back into the community. So in essence, we're kind of, we had been a little bit of investment and we were bootstrapped, but because of our model, we need to get to a certain size before we can cover the whole kind of management layer of costs. So anyway, long long answer to a short question. We are $250,000 into $500,000 raise. So yeah, we got 150,000 out of a large non-profit that invests in nature-based type projects like ourselves, and then we're just over $100,000 into a crowdfunding campaign. So we're aiming to raise the other 350 on there. We're about 110, 115. So we're over halfway through, which is good because we need to get to the full amount by mid-year. But my question is sorry, go on.
That's what I said. Congratulations. Investors like to hear that you're halfway there.
Cool. Thank you. I think, before this, I was founder of a tech business. I've raised money around technology. It's actually, I don't know if it's easier, but it's getting people excited about the kind of, hey, there's a 10x return. We're going to sell this, exit this in 7 years. It attracts a certain type of investor, and it's a different kind of conversation too. Hey, this is much more conservative, but also much more secure. However, it's only a 2x return, which you'll start getting immediately. You think would be easier because it's really a kind of impact investment. I suppose my question is, any advice for, and actually, are you seeing more opportunities for funding into these types of models? Because nature-based solutions typically aren't like a climate tech type raise. There is, often, unless they've built some technology, often, they're just raising debt in order to scale to a level where they're self-sustaining. And yeah, have you seen funds to cover these types of models? Any advice? Yeah, I mean, obviously we're halfway through. We're doing well, so that's a good sign, I suppose. But yeah.
No, absolutely. I think what we're seeing now. I'm seeing several of my friends who have closed their first-time climate tech funds, getting capital from a lot of foundations, families, government as well. And I think the answer there is you've got to get a bit creative. Investors might be more, as you said, foundations, families, government departments, World Bank, companies like that would actually be supportive at this stage. And I'm seeing that type of capital, in startups like yours. And then another thing I would say is obviously because the market conditions are harder right now for everyone, in every single industry. I always say, whenever there's a downturn, everybody needs to up their game. And what that means, where I'm seeing success stories is people who become really, really good at storytelling, at building relationships, and really at execution, as I was saying before. People that can show that they master these three things are seeing a lot of success, even in these times that are more difficult.
Cool, good advice. What developments, what trends do you think we're going to see in coming years? Obviously, we hope that markets will get easier. That whether they do or not, do you foresee more capital coming in 2025 and beyond because of the kind of urgency and need of what we do? What are some of the things you foresee in the future in this sector?
Well, absolutely. I think it's pretty, everybody's been talking right now about a few areas that are going to be really changing over the last few years. And, there's AI, there's cybersecurity and sustainability. I would say, the top three industries that are going to be driving growth forward because that's what is on everybody's mind.
Cool. Something a little bit sideways, slightly different question. I know you're also a content creator, right? As well as an investor. You spend your time creating content. What is the motivation behind that? Why do you spend time doing it? How do you see it as important? Tell us a little bit more about that. Would be good.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've gone down the content audience building rabbit hole yet, but I went down that route about 6 months ago, I would say. And the reason for that is because we are now moving from entertaining and information coming from institutions. So we're moving away from that towards actually individuals driving entertainment and information. So, we're seeing that with, social media. We're seeing that, I don't know if you saw, for example, last week on the cover of Time magazine was Mr. Beast, the YouTuber.
Okay.
Who now, he's basically doing YouTube videos, and he's been doing that for a long time. He's built a $700 million empire with that. He's 25 and
Wow.
he's literally can pretty much make anything go viral today. And so basically, thanks to, social media platforms, you're seeing individuals raising as the gateway to entertainment and information, as opposed to traditionally institutions like the New York Times, Time Magazine, companies in general. And so because of that trend, I think as climate, you as a climate founder, me as a climate investor, advisor, I think using that to, gather your community, whether you're looking for investors, whether you're looking for talent, whether you're looking for, to hire somebody for your team, being able to build an audience by sharing content about what you care about is key.
Yeah, I agree. And to answer your question, have I gone down the rabbit hole? Not. I mean, I'm kind of always halfway down the rabbit hole just with the work I'm doing, because I'm always thinking about how to reach out and connect and network online. And obviously, I do this podcast and manage our blog content. But I'm certainly no expert, not cracking the kind of numbers I'd like to be. There is a bit of a secret sauce in terms of trying to get out there. Actually, I suppose a linked question, but the TikTok is not something personally I've ever kind of indulged in, but we're starting to see with the work we do and the communities within our business that we have throughout Africa and Southeast Asia, maybe a need to get out on that platform. Where do you see TikTok fitting into this world? Do you see it as an important kind of business tool for fundraisers in this space? Is it something people should be on, or does it not matter? You just find your own kind of pathways through social media that makes sense?
Absolutely. I think, TikTok, I'm not creating content there, but one day I will, because if you think about it, if TikTok users are basically age, 15 to 25, those are the ones that are going to be building the companies tomorrow and investing in the companies tomorrow. So just in terms of demographic, absolutely, right? Because LinkedIn and Instagram are for people that are usually slightly older, like 25 and above. So yeah, basically the TikTokers are going to be, the founders and investors of tomorrow. So absolutely, I think if you can, but at the same time, you can't be, unless you have a whole team managing your socials, you can't really do all of them at the same time if you're doing that yourself.
Yeah, this is part of the startup challenge, right? Wearing a number of hats as you get going and trying to do everything well. But yeah, there's certain constraints, obviously. So
yeah, no, I'd recommend just as if you have a small team, to just start with 1 or 2 channels max and get really good on those. And then once you have a bigger team, to go on the other channels. So for example, I've picked for myself LinkedIn and Instagram, and I'm focusing on those and getting really good at those. And then when my team will be bigger, I may, do the rest as well.
Cool. Sounds good. And on the word of advice, as you're giving advice, I mean, talking to founders, talking to people in their first year, do you have any particular advice for anyone as a founder or thinking of starting, founding their first startup in the climate space? And what kind of advice would you give them?
So my advice is around having a very clear vision. So, knowing what you're building, having a very clear 10-year vision, what that looks like. And, despite what everybody may tell you that it won't work or whatever it might be, to, keep that vision as crystal clear as you can, because that and your why will be your drivers. And at that same time, surrounding yourself with others who see that as well, because that will obviously, help us make things happen. If we're surrounded by people who can see how we can do things differently, who can see how we can build these climate ventures, then it'll be much easier. So yeah, having a vision and surrounding yourself with people that see it as well.
Cool. Great advice. I didn't have any more questions. Actually, just on that though, we connected because on LinkedIn, you put out some great advice. I don't remember it exactly, but I know I commented on it and I shared it actually with our executive team because we're in the middle of this fundraising round. So I appreciate you putting that out there. It was helpful and I will keep looking for your updates. Unless there's any other questions I didn't ask that you'd like to to answer, let me know. Otherwise, be great to share where people can learn more about you, get in touch, read some of the advice I also read. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Matt. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And of course, let me know if I can be of any help with your fundraising right now. Happy to, be of support, of course. And then in terms of people learning about myself, you can follow me obviously on LinkedIn under Helena Wasserman. And then the accelerator I run is called Unstoppable. So yeah, the go-to is really LinkedIn. You'll get all that information on there.
Cool. Well, yeah, for anyone watching or listening, I will also put that in the speaker notes. So if people didn't write it down, they can get it there. And yeah, look, thanks for taking your time to join. We shall keep talking and maybe do another one of these. We could even do some that are specific to certain areas of fundraising. But look, thanks a lot for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Helena.